Great.
All set.
Okay, thank you so much. Hi, folks, and welcome. My name is Rebecca Cahoe, and I'm with Memorial University's Office of Public Engagement. Today, we're streaming live from the Amera Innovation Exchange at our Signal Hill campus, located in St. John's, Newfoundland and Labrador. And we have our host and our panelists in different remote locations across our province. We acknowledge that the lands on which Memorial University's campuses are situated are in the traditional territories of diverse Indigenous groups. And we acknowledge with respect the diverse histories and cultures of the Beothuk, Mi'kmaq, Innu, and Inuit of this province. We strive for respectful relationships with all the peoples of this province as we search for collective healing and true reconciliation and honor this beautiful land together. Thank you so much for joining us for this special Engage Memorial session. We're celebrating Memorial's Research Week 2022. We've partnered with the Harris Center to pull together a session that will look at the ways that public engagement can enhance university research, both professionally but also personally. We're looking forward to hearing from our panel about their experiences. These folks have plenty to say, and I know this is going to be a good conversation. We encourage you all to use the chat feature to ask questions, make comments, share your thoughts. And Andrea from our team will also be using the chat to share relevant information like bios, links, things like that. We will be having a Q&A session at the end of the panel, and you will all be welcome to ask the panelists questions. You can do that directly, or you can use the chat feature for that. We'll also send a link to a quick survey. We really do appreciate your feedback, and we're always interested in hearing what types of public engagement topics you'd like us to cover next. This event is being recorded, and we will be sharing it through our YouTube and also through our e-newsletter, The Tandem. And with that, I would like to introduce our host for this event. It's the Dean of Memorial University's Faculty of Medicine, Dr. Margaret Steele.
Thanks very much, Rebecca, and welcome everyone, and thanks for taking time out of your busy schedules to meet with us today. And I think it'll be a very enjoyable panel about public engagement. As you know, public engagement is happening all across Memorial, but can look different from faculty to faculty. So for example, in the Faculty of Medicine, we speak to public engagement as social accountability. Other faculties may use the terms like community engagement or even outreach to describe their own actions and goals. At Memorial University, public engagement links back to the academic mission of the university. And as you know, there's a public engagement framework that was established several years ago at the university. Collaborations between people and groups both within Memorial and those people and groups outside of the university really further Memorial's mission in public engagement. So drawing on the knowledge and resources brought by all involved, public engagement involves mutual respect, mutual contributions, and mutual benefits for all participants. And this is especially true when we're looking at research. So public engagement really strengthens our research by helping identify community needs with our partners, and government, academic, and health partners may also be very involved in this process. So what I'm going to do is invite our panelists to introduce themselves briefly. I will call upon each one of them, and they'll tell us a little bit about how public engagement has shaped their research. After that, I have a couple of questions which each of the panelists will have an opportunity to speak to. And then around 11:05, people in the audience can actually ask questions through chat and otherwise. So again, thanks very much. And so I'll start with our panelists in the order to which I've been given. So Dr. Seftap Savas. Seftap, do you want to start?
Yeah, hi, thanks for having me. So I'm a professor of oncology and genetics, and it's a great pleasure to be here with you today. My main interest is to improve the conditions and well-being of individuals affected by cancer. This may be patients, survivors, family members, caregivers. And for this purpose, I do a lot of different things together with my students. But in the recent years, I also become interested in patient-oriented health research, so which is a part of public engagement. And I am a keen believer in partnering with our cancer-affected individuals in everything we want to achieve. For example, from designing studies to disseminating knowledge. So I currently lead the public interest group on cancer research that includes 13 cancer patients or family members from across Newfoundland and 4 scientists. So, so what is the most important thing, how it shaped my research? As Margaret just said, you know, public engagement with our community members. And in my case, for example, cancer-affected individuals help us to see their lives, their insights, and what is important for them. So the greatest change in my research was to design my studies based on what is important for cancer-affected individuals rather than what I thought was important for them. So I'll cut it here, and but we have a lot of other things to say. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Septa. Our next panelist is Dr. Peter Ride. Peter?
Hi, Margaret, and nice to meet you and all the other panelists and people involved in the conference. So my background, I'm new to Memorial. I'm the Dean of the School of Fine Arts, but I've recently arrived from the UK, from London, where I was for a number of years working in the field of museum and gallery studies. And my background actually is as a museum and gallery curator. So a lot of what I do is actually, public engagement is fundamental to that because the research actually is about engagement. It's through engagement. Most of the work that I would do would be working in partnership with other organizations. So for example, a museum or a gallery or a cultural organization. And it's very much about seeing how they can develop new means or how we can understand ways of working with audiences. So I'd say that if I was putting hashtags on here, I'd say impact, participation, and community are the 3 really important hashtags because research, where it moves from the working within the university into cultural organizations is very much about these notions of how why public engage, how public engage and what they do. And I'd also just throw in here as well, there is a difference between practice-led research and research-led practice within the arts. But both of these can involve engagement, and maybe we can sort of talk about those later.
Thanks very much, Peter, and welcome. I think you're the newest member to not only the panel, but to the university, so welcome.
Thank you.
So our next speaker is Dr. Rose Riccadelli. Rose?
So I'm Professor Rose Riccadelli. I'm a research chair in safety, security, and wellness at Memorial University, the Fisheries and Marine Institute, and cross-appointed to Community Health and Humanities. And my research in public engagement is very much within justice organizations and working in partnership to actually action items and move knowledge forward. And I think, and I'll talk about that today, I think one of the biggest struggles that come to fruition is really that, the academic work you do versus the applied work to do, and how to balance when sometimes the applied isn't what your standard is for the academic in certain ways, like maybe it's slightly less theoretical or a different way of writing. And also, I realize knowledge mobilization takes a lot of time and a lot of commitment. And it's something that I didn't realize how much time it took before I started doing it. So I'm looking forward to the panel today. Thank you for having me.
Thanks very much, Rose. Our next speaker is Dr. Joe Dario. I hope I'm pronouncing your last name correctly, Joe.
It's Joe Dario, and that's okay. It's the rare times that it's pronounced right the first time you see it because there's too many vowels, right? Yeah, I'm an associate professor in civil engineering. My research is really focused on climate change impacts and design of infrastructure, and my area is in water. So I do a lot of stormwater infrastructure and coastal issues, coastal flooding, things like that. And public engagement has been really, really important because in the engineering disciplines, it's so often where engineers come and they have we have a standard set of solutions that are kind of imposed on communities when they don't always fit. And so it's really, really important to talk to folks. So once I started kind of getting involved and realizing that a lot of standard solutions for infrastructure, in particular when we're dealing with climate change, when things need to be done differently, they don't take into account the people that use the infrastructure and live with it, and also the resources and knowledge available to understand what the needs are. And that's I think, an important missing component in engineering design. And so, trying to build a process where we get, municipal leaders and community members more involved in the design process itself. It's been an interesting challenge, especially the past couple of years. COVID's really gotten in the way, but yeah. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. So I look forward to the rest of the morning. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Joe. And our last but not least panelist is Dr. Amy Hudson. Amy?
Good morning. Thank you, and thanks for inviting me to be a part of the panel. My name is Amy, and I come from Black Tickle. That's a small remote island community off the southeast coast of Labrador in Nunatchikavut. That's the original. That's the traditional territory of Inuit in that area. I am fairly new to MUN as faculty, but not otherwise. I started with, I'm assistant professor with the School of Arctic and Subarctic Studies at the Labrador campus as of May 2022, so fairly new. I'm also chief governance officer and co-lead negotiator with Nunatchikavut Community Council, which is the Inuit government that represents the people where I come from. So much of the public engagement work I do currently is with Indigenous communities. And in this context, what I call and what we call community engagement in research is really about ensuring that Indigenous peoples lead with their and our own values and practices as it relates to what's of interest and priority to them in their communities and as it impacts their communities. So this form of Indigenous community engagement particularly helps to ensure that all the work that we aspire to do together are fundamentally driven by three key things. That is, the work that we do together validates their knowledge, validates Indigenous knowledge and Indigenous science, recognizing that that exists. That the work we do together is strength-based, recognizing that there are diverse sources of expertise located within Indigenous communities. And of course, that the work we do together is rights-based, so that we honor the inherent rights of the Indigenous peoples that we're working with. So currently I'm a researcher in my own community and on my own ancestral lands. So both as academic and community member, my approach is that I'm responsible and accountable to all of my relations. And this is really important to how we do community engagement work in our territory. And this includes the lands and waters and ice and future generations. It also means that I have an ethical responsibility to respect and adhere to cultural practices and protocols in my and other diverse communities where research and community partners will also be impacted by the work that they do in their community. So ultimately, I'm guided by community engagement principles that are shaped by my own community values, perspectives, and experiences. And this essentially means that I only do research that is wanted and desired by community because those are the people that it will ultimately impact. And so right now, most of my work is in the area of Indigenous governance and sustainability in the context of, health as self-government, education, history. I work a lot in those areas. So thank you for inviting me.
Thanks very much, Amy. And I think everybody would agree that we have a nice, diverse group of individuals with a variety of research interests. And Amy, you did a nice segue into my next question. So some of you have alluded to this already, but it's a three-part question. So how did you choose to include public engagement as part of your research career? How has it affected the way you approach your work and how your research has been received? Maybe I'll keep going in kind of a different type of order. So, Peter, did you want to answer that question next?
I was really hoping you wouldn't do that, but but anyway, yeah. So as I said, to be honest, it's a bit of a no-brainer when you're working in the cultural sector because things produced which are not for an audience or a participation or engagement with others doesn't always make sense. Well, of course, a huge amount of work happens within the cultural sector, which has got a scholarly outcome, and I've published a number of books and papers as most academics do, but the largest amount of staff is embedded in the things that other people do. And some of the things that Amy was just talking about that absolutely resonated with me, that that work needs to be based with the values and the desires of communities where it's going to be based. One of the big things that's happened with cultural organizations in the last sort of 10 years or so is that shift between them seeing themselves as places of authoritative knowledge, and while still, curatorship, custodianship, kind of, management of knowledge and resources and things like that. Of course, it invested within organizations and people working within them, but that necessity to see that there are multiple dialogues and narratives going on, there are hidden histories that need to be explored, there are different ways of doing things, and as well that audiences, participants, come into things with their own narratives, that knowledge and the way in which we appreciate things is highly subjective. And without being too banal about it, there are no right ways or wrong ways of seeing cultural products. People, of course, take their own ways of reading to it. And so from my point of view, these are all the things. I'm meandering a little bit about from your question, but this is why public engagement is such a huge part of my research, that I think it's only responsible when you're working within the arts and the cultural sector to be open to these sorts of questions. And those fundamental things about who you're doing things for and why you're doing them. Diversity, inclusion immediately become part of that as well. And I would add on to that, and I hadn't said before, it's all very well to talk about impact and engagement, but if you're not getting a degree of kind of feedback and understanding of how you're working in dialogue with others, or if you're doing things with others, how they're responding to it, the research, the activity becomes rather one-sided. All you're doing is broadcasting your knowledge. And, we usually often use the word in academia, disseminating, but actually disseminating sounds like it's just seeding the ground as opposed to creating a kind of a mutual relationship. And that's the most desirable thing to do. So I haven't answered how my research has been received, but I'd say the research is received through a dialogic means.
And Peter, just to add to that, I wonder, you mentioned how you get the feedback. So over the years of your involvement with the community, how has your research evolved based on your feedback over time?
Sometimes I've done projects which are really specific, working with audience and groups in museums and galleries, where we are saying, for example, how might you find new ways to interpret this work of art or this museum exhibition? For example, if you're looking at a painting in a gallery, are there ways that actually we can create multisensory environments so that you touch, you smell, you engage with things, you do things where English isn't the primary language? And sometimes I'm a great believer in interdisciplinary research and working, for example, with psychologists who are bringing in very well-honed evaluation methods to actually understand how people are appreciating things and looking longitudinally over the way in which people might respond to a cultural engagement, and then 6 months later come back and see how their memories are activated. So there are those sorts of things, but also with participation projects where you're doing things in dialogue with people, they're in fact shaping what you do. So the feedback is completely cyclical. It's essentially, you're often using an action research-based model. So you're proposing something, doing it, working with people, reflecting on what you're doing it again, doing it again, doing it again. So the feedback becomes a loop in there.
Great, thanks. Rose, do you want to address this question?
I'm happy to. So it's a three-part question. It's a bit complicated, but um, I never really chose to include I never really chose to actually include public engagement as part of what I was doing. It sort of just happened because as you were doing the research, you want to give back to the people you're doing the research and return the findings of the research so it can actually be action. So what I found is it kind of happened naturally, but it keeps escalating because the more you disseminate your work to groups that can make change with the work, the more they come for more knowledge that they can then use to make more change. So, so I found it but it has really impacted my approach. And the way it's impacted my approach is just changing somewhat how I do the different work and not the research and the methods and everything else, but what I put together in order to give it back. Because there's a way, like what we really want is the evidence base. So we want to be really methodologically strong when we're disseminating, and some of our theoretical explanations as to why are really good contextually if we can demonstrate them. But it's really important to be able to always demonstrate where exactly it's coming from because people will act on it. So, and that's kind of what I was talking about before, that little bit of attention that starts, because I recognize, and I've been dealing with this idea that what I really value when I write and some of the things I really enjoy writing are not necessarily ways that I will write when I'm disseminating. So it's trying to figure out that balance of how to make your work really accessible, straightforward and to the point, and actionable through recommendations and that sort of thing. So I find it has approached it, and I find more now than ever when I do research, I'm taking the knowledge I'm learning from the people I'm working with as I disseminate my knowledge, and that's informing my next steps. So the gaps in knowledge we need as we try to implement change becomes very pertinent to what needs to be researched in order to get over whatever that hiccup is to implement the change. So I'm finding they're really both shaping each other now.
Thanks very much, Rose, because it sounds like it's become more of an iterative process and a little bit more intentional than when you first started. Would that be
Exactly.
safe to say?
Well, and it's also a very positive feeling when you actually see your work being actualized. So you see it in policies, you see it in practices, you see it in how things move forward, but you also recognize that that recommendation only makes sense in the context. So you want to check the context. Like if I'm doing stuff with correctional worker well-being, my recommendations for the frontline are different than those for management. So in order to unpack what management needed to be consistent required more research and more studies. So I found it's kind of like I'm getting more nuanced in the field, and that in turn is making my knowledge dissemination more nuanced. But it always goes back to not everyone that you want to disseminate your knowledge to wants to hear it. So when people hear it, it becomes very iterative and a lot of additional work. I feel like half the grants should be knowledge mobilization now. But if people don't want to hear it, then you know that all that body of work just you don't really see again for the foreseeable future. So it's really an interesting dynamic and how it can progress forward.
Yeah, and I think it speaks to what Peter and Amy have said about the importance of value to the people who are involved in the research. So thanks. And so Joe, I'll pass it on to you, but it's interesting just based on the initial discussion and introduction that you're probably in your field newer to this type of public engagement. So I wondered if you could address the question from your point of view.
Yeah, I did. I lost a little contact in here. I think you were talking to you asking me, I think, or was it someone else? I'm sorry, I didn't.
No, to you, Joe. I was just
Okay.
saying that based on your introduction, relative to the other panelists, you probably are newer
Yep.
in your work with public engagement. So I wondered if you could address the question based on, you know, your more recent experience,
Yep.
so to speak.
Yeah. And it's funny because it's similar to Rose. It wasn't a choice, really a conscious choice. It just kind of led that way. And as you say, we're in you know, engineering. There's not there's engagement with stakeholders, which is very, very common. But it's you know, engaging with the public is very, very different. So in my work, you know, in trying to coming up with ways and new ways to address really the uncertainty that comes with climate change, and there's a lot we know, But so much of that uncertainty falls on to the users of infrastructure and the folks who are paying for it. And so I realized it became really, really important to kind of really address needs and find out what's really needed, because that's kind of lacking, from an engineering perspective. Like I had said earlier, it's, we have these standard solutions that will do the job that needs to be done, but they're not always ideal. And so it's important to get an understanding of what people need, and then there's a feedback process where it becomes there's a lot of educational aspects and outreach in terms of getting people to understand that not of course not all the technical details, but that they have something to say in this, and then given where they stand in terms of the resources they have, the amount of money, they can make decisions and get involved in the process. And I mean, really, it's had a big effect on the work, because I'm working now with one of my projects. I work with a psychologist, a social psychologist, and I work with folks in geography, because in order to really enhance engagement, we need to understand what people know about a lot of the technical solutions, how they feel about climate change, what they understand about climate change, because there's a really important component there where I think when the general public and the decision makers come to technical experts and engineers, there's a big gap, and the folks don't really understand what we do. But it doesn't need to be that way. The technical details engineers can handle, but there's a space in there where there's more room for conversation. And so a lot of my work has come now working, like I said, working with others in more the socioeconomic aspects. And so it's kind of, we're still at kind of the beginning stages in how to integrate this. It's been done globally. There's this larger movement to do that, and now it's kind of bringing that into the province and doing this. So I don't know if that answers the question very well, but it's had a big effect. And in terms of how the research has been received, it's within the field, people are hear it, they're very interested in it, but I have to say honestly, there's not full buy-in, because I think a lot of again, I think it's a lot to do with the gap between the technical understanding of engineers and professionals in those areas versus just the general understanding of things, and so I don't know how to describe it. There's the people, the professionals and the people in the research fields like the ideas, but they have a hard time seeing how it's going to work. And honestly, that's sometimes it goes well, sometimes it doesn't. We are in those beginning phases. There hasn't been a whole lot of work done, because we're in a new era with climate change and how we incorporate that. So again, hopefully that provides some sense. I still struggle with a lot of this myself.
So Joe, thanks very much. I'm just wondering, given the short period of time you've been involved in this work, and it sounds like there needs to be a lot more energy and to get buy-in, have you got some initial thoughts about what strategies you might use to actually increase buy-in?
Yeah, so the approach I've been taking in that is really to reach out to the municipalities and the local decision makers to, quite frankly, to demand more or different responses from the engineers. That's been my approach, because in engineering, we can take that top-down approch, but it doesn't always give the right solutions. And in my view, to really increase the effectiveness of this is just have hopefully the folks who are asking for this, so they know better what to ask for in terms of potential solutions for infrastructure. We've got a workshop next week where we're doing this. We're talking to municipalities to see, kind of gauge that initial communications aspect, so that municipal decision makers can say, and communities can say, well, we know we need this, and then it can ask for that explicitly. Whereas, now they don't know that, and so that's where we are now, is the buy-in, trying to get buy-in, so from for the professionals by having communities push them to do these things. That's been my approach. Anyway, we'll see how it works. So.
Thanks very much. And Amy, you had started answering this question, and I think it's incredibly important with the Indigenous communities that engagement starts right at the front. And I wondered if you could expand on your answer to this question.
Yeah, certainly. I think, I guess in the context of how why I chose public engagement or community engagement as an element of my research career. So new to faculty at Memorial, but not new to research. I've been doing research in Nunatuhavu for the last, I guess, decade or so in areas. In diverse areas. And so before I came to Memorial, I was the director, the founder and director of the Research, Education, and Culture Department at Nunatuhavu Community Council. And I led the development of a research governance protocol there. And we put in place a governance protocol whereby any partners, universities, or ourselves, anyone conducting research or interested in conducting research, there's a process, there's a cultural protocol now that we have to follow. And so I follow that as well now as faculty. And what that means is that there's an application process, there's an engagement process, there's an expectation of discussion where you, depending on your level of knowledge of the communities, where you begin to learn about the communities and the culture and the people that you have interest in working in. And so, things like why you're interested in working in these communities is important, what contributions you have to bring, your research approach, all of these things are very important. So very holistically, matters of who can do research, when, where, and why are regarded in that way very holistically. So that's important. So in that way, any research I do really necessitates community engagement. And I guess personally, for me, and as an Indigenous person, it's really important to me that research really be about decolonizing, and that I be a part of decolonizing practices, and that the work that we do actually tangibly, positively impact people in communities. So it may be dealing with things around water security issues. My community, for example, doesn't have pipe running water ever, and so I've been working with the community in that. Could be matters around health or food security issues across our territory. So real issues that impact the potential sustainability of our communities. Things around, the sustainability of cultural knowledge, and ensuring that we can continue to live the way that we have and the way that we want to, healthily on our own lands, on the lands of our ancestors. So how can we do work together that ensures these types of outcomes? And we must recognize that, research, while it can be a strength and a tool to ensure the sustainability of communities in many ways, it has historically and presently can have and has played a harmful role in Indigenous communities. There's examples of harmful research practices is when researchers or research practice violate cultural protocols, when data is extracted from Indigenous communities and used outside of the cultural context in which it was collected. That's why when stories are misrepresented, and we hear stories of this all the time, and these are concerns that are brought forward in community when research teams and people go in wanting to work with you. So there really is I think a nuanced, balanced approach to doing research in this way that really is ethical and culturally appropriate, and balances the ongoing and historic impact that Western research practice can have and has, and how we can do research better. And I think with respect to how the research that I do is received, my research is never just mine. I work with teams and communities of people who are very much a part of and co-leaders of research, and because they're the experts if I'm working in their community. So they help to lead the process, I guess. Yeah.
And since you've been doing this for quite a long time, Amy, and you're very much responsive to the community and recognize the importance that these are led by the communities, have things changed for you in your research over time?
Yes, I'm delving into research areas that I never thought I would be in. So I am an interdisciplinary researcher, and what I'm realizing is that I used to have these big dreams of theory and things like that. And what I'm realizing now is that, when you're committed to the work that you do, when you're committed to research in this way, and it's a part of how you do the work, your work is about responding to the priorities and needs of the community, and to ensuring that we can just do things to help make life a little bit better. This is important for policy and advocacy at the federal and provincial level. In my other professional roles, as negotiator, the research that I do supports rights-based negotiations. The work that I do as chief governance officer, supports how we address and deal with areas of governance around health. So it's really about understanding communities, listening to priorities, and bringing people in to be a part of addressing them, because what we know is that the adaptive capacity, of Inuit in this case, is well demonstrated, well illustrated, and it's about really supporting Inuit and the knowledge they have and the research they've always done on their and our own lands, and bringing that into practice. And that's been a really important part of ensuring that the work that we do is respectful and received as such.
Thanks very much. And Seftaf, you have the opportunity to give your perspective, and you had also mentioned that this is relatively new for your research. So I wondered if you could address the questions. Thanks.
Yeah, so thanks. And I think I really enjoy listening to all my colleagues here. They brought really common, I think, keywords like what is the needs and priorities of communities, and then how it is valuable to work with our communities, etc. And for me, my focus is the cancer patients and cancer survivors, family members, and so on, their well-being and conditions. So I started, I think, patient-oriented research in 2021. So one thing that we did was to, establish a public interest group on cancer research, which includes 4 scientists and 13 cancer-affected individuals from across Newfoundland and Labrador. And one thing that we have done in 2021 was what is the needs and priorities of cancer patients from our province, from different geographic regions, with different, diverse characteristics, cancers affected, and so on. So based on this, we found 3 key points, and then for one of them, which is the information needs, we developed a research proposal. So we are currently, applying for funding. Hopefully, once we get the funding, we will be able to examine this need and priority in this province, and hopefully bring, information and knowledge that our cancer patients and family members will need in order to, go through this cancer trajectory in a little bit better, safer, and healthier way. So this is so in this regard, I can't really know right now whether or not our public engagement informed or public informed research was received. But I can say that I chose to engage with public. I chose to engage with patients and family members. The reason is that I'm a geneticist and cancer scientist. But I usually do work in the lab and then with the computer statistics, this and that, but my overall aim is really large, right? It's big. I really want to support our cancer patients' families, either through understanding the science beyond cancer, but it takes sometimes decades to see, how it can translate into a practice in healthcare, in social support services, and so on. But the other, there are other things that I can do as a cancer scientist and with a genuine interest in improving the conditions for cancer-affected individuals. What are these? Like leadership. And the other one is, for example, working with our cancer patients and families, which exactly I am doing right now. So I really chose to do that. And it's really fun. It's very motivating, and I learned a lot. And in terms of how it changed my research, I can tell you it changed a lot, and it's in a very, very positive way. And when I say it, I'm really genuine and authentic. I'm not, making it up. Incredible experience to be working with our cancer patients and family members. First of all, it's not a top-down approach anymore, right? We are partner, we are collaborator. They are the experts of their lived experiences. So when you get this, I think, principle in mind, everything just flows, right? There can be challenges, there can be new angles to think about, but still, I think once you have this collaborative mindset, everything just falls into place. And we also have academic freedom as a group. Right? So we can evolve in any way that we want. Like last year, we started to advocate for other cancer patients and families in Newfoundland and Labrador. And we hear what our members say. We got annual surveys so that we know how they feel, how they want us to move forward as a group. And we are very active in terms of, in local media, social media. And the other thing I want to say is that, public engagement is also a scholarly area. So we actually published our public interest group on cancer research, its creation, and the work it has done in the first 1 year in a scholarly journal in September. And some of our authors are actually our patient partners. So I think, this is something that I never thought about, like maybe 2 years ago, but it's happening. It's very exciting. It's motivating. It's a great personal and professional, very satisfactory for me and very motivating. I want to do more. And you know what? I always say that, with our cancer patients, our families on my side, I'm not afraid of anything, and I can do everything in my power that I'm not even aware of. So the impact of public engagement on my personal and professional work and research has been amazing, incredibly big, and very, very impactful. Hopefully, we will continue our great work and continue to, bring knowledge, research, maybe services, and at least increase awareness of about, a lot of important things that our population can benefit from. So does that answer your question, Margaret?
Yeah, thanks, Septa. I've got one follow-up question. So, it's impacted for sure the way you're approaching your research.
Yep.
But what do you think in this short period of time has been the biggest impact for the patients?
Right. So biggest impact for them is that somebody is actually paying attention to their lived experiences. Somebody is actually listening to them and asking what's important for you. What is meaningful for you? What should I do as a researcher, scholar, and professor to help you and others going through cancer in this province? How can we make things happen? So I think this is the most important thing. Everybody wants to be heard, paid attention to, especially if they are in a situation that they actually deserve better conditions or situations or support or etc. So I think this is the biggest thing, and we do see, like in my experience, I know that all cancer patients and families, their genuine interest is actually to help others going through cancer. So, so through bringing their voices to us, seeing that we are, developing studies, developing public engagement activities like the public conference on cancer we organize in October, and all other, advocacy, bringing information, etc. kind of activities. I think they are satisfied, and they want to do more. Some of these ideas that I am doing actually is their ideas. So they want me to, for example, raise awareness about this. So I do that very happily. It's very exciting. So it's great. It's mutual interest. There's a common goal, right? And there is mutual interest and respect and understanding and listening. And this is really important. And I think we were able to form a community feeling as well. And this is really important. And we don't see it in, for example, in academic environment. but this community feeling is really great. Like we are there to support each other in many ways and learn from each other and respect each other. And it's just, and I can't take any credit for this. I think our public members are, establishing this fabric and the character of the group. So going back to your question again, I think the most important thing in such a short time, like maybe 1.5 years, that our public members got out of our public engagement activities is that they are heard. We want to do things and we want to do things together.
Great. So as everybody can tell, we've got very passionate individuals on the panel. So I'm going to actually take the chair's prerogative and ask people if you have questions and whether you want to direct them to any specific panelists. So I don't know, Rebecca, is it going to come through the chat, or are people going to be able to actually verbalize their questions?
Hi, Margaret. Yeah, that's a great approach. And folks can put questions into the chat, but they can also just raise their hands. If you look at the bottom of the screen to the left of the red X button, there's a little hand. If you just press that, we'll be able to see that you want to ask a question, and we will actually open the floor to you.
Okay, so within our audience, we have good participation. Does anybody have specific questions? Give people time to respond.
Margaret, I see there is a question, and if you feel good about this, I actually can be the person who kind of keeps an eye out for that for you, if that's good.
That would be perfect, because I can't see it.
Yeah. I see that Maizam Najafizada has a question. So Maizam, you can go ahead with your question. Okay, Christopher, are you still there? Can you ensure that Maizam is able to state her question? She's on mute right now.
All right. Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Oh, sorry, and I apologize. I misgendered you. Sorry for that.
Sorry. It's Maisam here. May I speak?
Yes, absolutely, Maisam.
All right. Thank you. Thank you so much, everybody. It was a very informative conversation about community engagement and public engagement. My question is, how do we engage with the general public beyond our specific participants of our research? Most often we've got target audience who are very broad, and an engagement with them often requires going through either mass media, social media, or other forms of communication beyond or one-on-one or kind of community engagement. So I wonder to what extent can we go on specifically at this moment. Our research, for example, one of our research is on cannabis research, and our target audience are youth and young adults. To reach them, we need to go to social media and be very engaged with them. My question is, how do we do that, and what kind of capacities and resources do we need as academics to reach those kind of audience?
Thanks, Maisam. Did you have anybody in particular, or do you just want the panel, each one, to address that?
So can I just maybe chip in?
Sure, Sapta. Yeah.
Yeah, hi. So this is a great question, Maisam. So it's one of the challenges that we also experience. You are right. Like we certainly have some target groups. Like in your case, it's the youth. For me, it's the general public. Regardless of their age or etc. And across from the province or other parts of the country as well. So how do we reach out to everybody, especially on something that is fearful as cancer, right? It's this extra layer of challenge. But going back to what you are saying, so It's also a challenge for us. It takes a lot of time to actually go through, for example, radio programs, local articles, and social media, and through MAN, and reaching out to organizations, reaching out to different regions. Especially if, because not everybody has actually access to, for example, reliable internet services or cell phone. And we really need to think about inclusion, diversity, how to reach. And when we think about this, and there are so many different preferences. Some individuals like me, printed materials. Some others are good with video. Some others are, great with the phone. But, there are so many variables in what is the most effective way to reach out to our population in terms of engaging them in our conversation, engaging them in our research or knowledge dissemination. So thanks again for bringing this forward. What I can say is that we really need more resources to do that, right? We really need, for example, for you is youth. I know that in social media they utilize like Instagram, I think, more than in other social media, but we really need someone to integrate or outreach to youth through this, for example, social media. How do we do that? I mean, I used to do this for my own public engagement, but it takes considerable time. I'm not complaining. I really enjoy this. However, if we had more resources available, that would be much easier for us. The other thing is that for everyone, like for example, Masam, for my purpose, for another researcher purpose, we really need to start from the beginning, like scratch, right? So I'm looking for some target audience, and Masam is looking for another. But what if we had a network of communication that we can reach out to different parts of the population? I think this is one thing that I'm really thinking about. How do we reach effectively? And I think this is one of the barriers for participation by our public members as well. So if we can develop the networks of channels to reach out to our public members, that would be really great. Very, very resourceful, very effective. So that's all I have to say.
Thanks, Septa. And do any of the other panelists want to address that question? If you can just put up your hand and then I can, your virtual hand, then I can go to you. Okay, Amy and then Peter.
Yeah, thanks for the question. And I'm not sure that my answer is directly relevant, but it has more to do with how research is received and the impact of that on broader and target audiences. And so it kind of reminds me of the multifaceted role that I always play as a researcher in the context in which I work. And going back to ensuring that the work we do together is based on Indigenous knowledge and science, is strength-based and rights-based. So over the last half a dozen or so years, I've been doing a lot of work with the Nunatukuva Community Council and some other colleagues at MON in the area of Inuit education, largely out of advocacy from community members, parents, aunties, uncles, and the elders who want to see more traditional education, or who actually wanted to see traditional education as part of the work that they that youth have accessible to them in their communities and in their schools. So what we did was, on the one end, informed by research as well, we developed an Inuit education program funded by NCC, Nunatukuva Community Council, and that was implemented in the school. And that was just one phase. The next phase was, and it took years, this didn't happen overnight, was getting to a place in a relationship with the Provincial Department of Education and the Newfoundland Labrador English School District to become a greater participant on behalf of communities in having an impact on curriculum and those types of outcomes in the schools in our province. So what has happened, and not getting into the years-long advocacy and work and partnership building. So not just partnership building, right, within your own community, but when you're doing this type of research, it necessitates relationship building and partnership building with various levels of government, with other stakeholders, and with other people, and recognizing who the people are that you can bring in to help advance your mutual interests and goals in this area. And so on September 30th, actually, the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation, we, NCC, provincial government and LESD, our Newfoundland Labrador English School District, held a ceremony for a signing of a memorandum of understanding in education. So what that means is all these years of research, a commitment to continuing research, means that we're going to impact a larger target audience that will see updated and informed Inuit curriculum and perspectives and values in the school system, knowledge around residential schools and just things like that will not only be accessible within classrooms on the southeast coast of Labrador, but throughout our province, impacting a larger population, creating opportunities to advance our knowledge, right? Our collective knowledge as a people, as a province, but to learn more about each other. So I guess all that to say, there are ways to mobilize your research to have impacts, positive impacts that are broader than the communities that you're working with as well.
Thanks for that nice example, Amy. Peter?
Well, I'm finding this, I just want to start off saying I'm finding this absolutely fascinating because for lots of reasons, but one is because we all come from so many different areas of expertise. And it's reminded me, of course, that when we talk about research and communities, we are, of course, a kind of a small, as Memorial, a small community amongst ourselves. But we also demonstrate the fact that the communities, when we talk about communities, we're also talking about people who are experts in their own field. So, you know, from my point of view, working in the arts, because none of you have stipulated you work within the fields of arts, your creativity, you represent part of the broader community to me. Sevtap, I would represent, I'm sure, to you in another context, part of the broader public who are interested in issues about health and cancer. In different situations, Joe, the things that you're talking about, I am part of the broader public. So I think it's always really important for us as researchers to remember that the communities with which we're engaging are made up of people of expertise of all sorts of different levels. There's huge amounts of expert knowledge out there, and knowledge, of course, operates on many, many different levels. I am going to veer a little bit away from the original question, I think, because the idea of how do we reach people through public engagement? When the question was first asked, and I'm sorry I didn't write down the name of the person who asked the question, I apologize for that. When the question was first asked, I thought to myself, well, that's interesting because we can use the word engagement in many ways as well. And of course, because language is pliable, and when I'm talking about engagement, I'm really talking about an interactive engagement. I'm expecting that when I describe something as engaging with people during research, that they have a buy-in to the research. They're helping possibly shape the direction which it's taking. Certainly there's something dialogic going on, so the research might be emergent and it can take different directions. It's not about broadcasting or representing the outcomes of knowledge which is being gained through a kind of research practice and showing it to other people. But of course, that's also legitimate as public engagement. And I was just scribbling down some thoughts as we were talking, and partly this is inspired by some of the stuff that Joe was saying, that the outcome of research can be that knowledge has been generated, and this is incredibly useful for people to then have access to that knowledge. That's a form of engagement which is really crucial. But there's another kind of research as well, which is process-based research, where engaging people in the practice of having a discussion, being involved in discovering new things, being involved in a dialogue about what new things have been discovered, that's empowering. That can enable self-expression. It can enable issues about representation. I've spent a lot of time as a queer person working around LGBTQ+ rights and representation. The way in which representation is incredibly powerful for people to voice themselves and understand their place in society and communities is crucial. So that can be part of the engagement that's going on, and it leads to big questions about quality of life and how the research processes we're going through can have important outcomes which are about broader sense of wellness and life quality.
Thanks very much, Peter. Atanu Sarkar? Atanu?
Yeah, yeah. Can you hear me?
Perfectly. Yeah, we can hear you. Go ahead. No, we can't hear you, Atanu.
Christopher, can you jump in and make sure that Atanu can be heard? In the meantime, I'm just going to mention Margaret. I also see that Mike Kehoe has a hand raised, and there is also a question in the chat from Steve Moyes directed to Joe. So I think that's the order in which they came in, and perhaps we can address them in that order as well.
Yeah, no, that's great. I can see Mike's hand up. I hadn't seen the chat. So, Atanu, are you able to speak?
Can you hear me?
Now we can.
Thank you. Thank you very much. First of all, I congratulate for organizing this all beautiful this session, and nice to see Amy, because I remembered I worked with Amy and in Practical. And Amy, congratulations for your new job, and wish you all the best. But my question is that the sustainability of this public engagement, because often we faculties are very much dependent on funding and support. Once it dries up, it is very difficult to continue.
Thanks, Atanu. Do you have anybody in particular you want to ask that question, or is that a general question? Seftaf and
Amy.
you want Amy? Okay,
Yeah.
Amy. Yeah, Amy.
Very nice to hear you, Atanu. I can't see you, but it's really nice to hear you. And Atanu and I, and Dr. Moore Hanrahan as well, traveled to, I was an RA at the time, traveled to Black Tickle back in, I don't know, 2011 or so, 2012.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's a really great question, and it's a question that plagues, I think, researchers, particularly doing community engaged work every single day, and that you lose sleep over, and it's, it can be really problematic. So what I've been doing lately, and because of my relationship with my Inuit government, and because of the role I also play there, I feel like I'm a little privileged because I do research that has positive impact on community. My research is sought by NCC, so by my Inuit government, and I find ways through not just Tri-Council funding and those relationships, but also through funding that's accessible for Indigenous governments and organizations through different programs, whether it be, anyway, within the federal government, and it's always about balancing and playing an active role in balancing and making decisions about research that you can't sustain, and bringing in partners and building. Again, Indigenous research is all about relationship building in the community, but relationship building with various levels of government, stakeholders, others, so that you have support people and you can bring people in. So most recently, for example, how we're doing this is co-supervising with a very good colleague of mine from Grenfell campus. We're co-supervising a couple of graduate students in the Sandwich Bay area, so just a little north Atanu of Black Tickle. And so what we're doing to ensure the longevity of that is we're sharing resources that we both have through faculty and NCC. And the graduate students, one of them in particular, is hoping to intern to write proposals, grant proposals in the various areas that our research is focused on as well. So really just, I guess, leveraging opportunities within the community, but we're also working with that particular community in Sandwich Bay, Cartwright, and we'll do professional development with them. So community members that are a part of the work that we're doing could also apply for funding and learn the skills needed to do that. So it's an issue, and when you can't, absolutely, and when you cannot sustain that level of engagement and presence, and relationship with the community, it really can have a damaging impact on your research career in that area. And it's a very important consideration, I think, not just for Memorial University, but for institutions who are engaging with the public in such meaningful ways. Ensuring those relationships can continue are important. I mean, I should also mention one of the other things we've done is just recently, as part of Memorial's Community Hub work that they're doing. It's very exciting. We actually just had a grand opening in Cartwright in Sandwich Bay a week ago. Opened the Sandwich Bay Community Hub, a partnership between the Sandwich Bay 50 Plus Club, NCC, and Memorial. And so that's a way to increase access to research and education initiatives in that community, and another way to sustain and continue to mobilize the research that we're doing there in that area. So just really looking at transformative, innovative ways that bring all kinds of people in to the work that we do.
Thanks, Amy. Maybe I have to re-establish with your network.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we'll go to Mike Kehoe. Mike?
Hey, Christopher, do you see Mike still there? Can you help him unmute, please?
Yep. Just clicking on him now. I can request the unmute, but Mike, you'll have to also select the button to unmute yourself once that's done.
Yeah, Christopher, I have unmuted. It shows that I'm unmuted. Are you able to hear me?
We can hear you now.
Okay, thank you very much. First of all, thank you very much for having this reach out, and it's very, very helpful. And I must say, I'm enjoying it as a non-researcher, as a consumer of your products. Many times, it's always nice to get more information on what happens. I'm a pretty old, well, not pretty, but I'm old. I'm in my 70s, and I've been very blessed with health and mental acuity and things like that up to now. Very active in social issues in particular. I want to perhaps address a concern. Just this morning I heard on radio, one of the radio programs, a bunch of statistics and given out where a lobby group on behalf of a particular cause, they're an advocacy group. They threw these statistics out and this report out there that really has no substance to it, nowhere you can trace the end of it. But it created an impression for them. And so really their whole thing in life is send us money and we're going to do good, and we're going to save the world. I know what that is, but these are advocacy groups. And while many advocacy groups are great, Amy's pointed out some really good ones there, there's also a contingency out there. They have what they call, I guess, an adopt a researcher program. They hire researchers to really generate facts to back up their position, whether it's to get more money, to get grants, to get a place at the table, whatever the case might be. I chair two groups. One is older workers of Newfoundland and Labrador, and the other one is Coastal People Resource Protection Group. One is for, as the name says, it's for conservation of biodiversity in the oceans to the benefit of the coastal people, and the other one is for the rights of older workers to continue working as they need to work longer, or let them find jobs and things like that. But we come across repeatedly groups that are out there, and they inundate you with research that you can't substantiate. So I guess for lack of a better person, I've heard Amy speak so much on her research and her integration with the communities and working on behalf of things. What recourse do people who don't belong to the community, what really can it do to get things straightened up? I mean, sometimes you're taking on large international corporations like this one this morning on radio. What other than protect, somebody can say, well, our good name's at stake. Unfortunately, is not, and in many cases. Amy, what can we as consumers of your products do to ensure that we're getting non-biased advocacy statistics and research?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean that's a that's a pretty complex, a great, but a very complex question. I think it goes back to some of the principles that I've outlined earlier in the approach to doing research, how we do that, and why we do the research, and perhaps considering. I think, you know, the subjectivity of research and the notion of bias is something that's often discussed and challenged, that Western institutions tend to challenge Indigenous researchers and communities sometimes on that front, when really it's about shifting the focus of why, understanding why Indigenous peoples often do research, and to what end. But I guess putting bias aside for a second, I think it's really, and you know, I just had my physiotherapist, because I have a broken arm. My physiotherapist asked, what can I learn about you guys? I just moved to the province. I'm really interested in learning about residential schools, the Indigenous peoples and communities, but I'm very aware that there's so much information out there for different purposes. There's politics involved. There's all these pieces. And so, you know what? The physiotherapist did something that we really encourage. If you want to learn about a certain people and community, it's really best to get to know them by reaching out to them yourself, right? By ensuring that being critical, like we're taught to be critical and analytical, to understand what we're learning, and reach out to the people that the information maybe is impacting, or that you want to learn more about, or if you just have questions. It's really about relationships and building those relationships. Unfortunately, I'm all too aware of a lot of politically inclined or otherwise motivated information and research that can circulate and have a negative impact. I'm aware that there's research that takes place that is unethical, uncredible, and creates different narratives and stories. But this research, this type of practice, always, in my experience, comes from outside the people that it's impacting. And I think that's an important lesson and key to thinking about who's doing research and why. Motivations are important. And sorry, your question was so broad and complex. I'm not sure that I answered all of it. So please let me know if you I hit on anything, or you need something more, or what.
Mike, did you have anything that you wanted to add or clarify? Christopher, can you help Mike out there?
Perhaps if we're having challenges there. Oh, Mike's back.
I think I have. Amy, you certainly did. Thank you so much. But I guess like your chiropractor, or your physiotherapist, or your doctor, or your whatever the case might be, when they do something wrong, you've got a board to go to, or some other agency to go to. When research comes out, and these are causes like save the environment, climate change, these are big causes and multiple groups and seeking things. You don't really have anywhere to go. I mean, it would be like struggling in quicksand to try and get to the bottom of this multi-million-dollar organization out saving the world. Is there some group that somebody can write and say, hey, you know what? I know this not to be fact. Anyway, that's enough for me. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and you know what, Mike? It doesn't have to be a multi-million-dollar corporation or entity that to create that level of harm. And unfortunately, in academic institutions, well, at Memorial, there is a process that you can go through, because Memorial has committed to indigenization and indigenization framework, and there's a policy on doing research with Indigenous peoples that impacts Indigenous peoples. However, outside of that, I do have experiences where academics move to private independent research practice, and unfortunately, there's not a lot. There's not really anything that that you can do, because outside of those practices, private researchers are not held to the same, Tri-Council policies or OCAP, different principles, ethical principles, right? So it's very problematic, and it's probably a larger political decision from Indigenous communities to decide how they want to proceed, and whether or not they're invited into the community or a part of that work. So it really goes back to working with the community to make decisions about how they would like to respond to said knowledge or research kind of thing.
Yeah, thanks, Amy. And I just want to stress a point that Amy made, Mike. If you have questions and you don't know who the researchers are, you can always reach out to the university research office because they could provide some guidance around that. So thank you very much for your questions and your response, Amy. And Rebecca, I didn't get who the chat is, so maybe you could address that one. Please.
So I see in the chat, there's a question from Steve Moyse, and he has just, he's typed it, so I'm just going to read it. The question is for Joe. When engaging on climate change mitigation in general, are you noticing any trends in various demographic groups?
Not explicitly. I would say I can relay a kind of an anecdote. So recently I was at a conference that held by municipalities Newfoundland and Labrador, and I was speaking with a landowner. He was lived out on the West Coast, and he was talking about, like, he had seen issues with his pier. Like, he lived right on the coast, and he had to upgrade his pier's dock that he was using for his fishing. And he was conveyed to me that other folks in the community weren't really listening to him because they weren't being impacted. So he was seeing the impacts of climate change and sea level rise, whereas other folks who weren't in vulnerable areas, they were not, they weren't as willing to, from what I got from him, as willing to accept that. And so that's, I think that it's hard to say in terms of demographics specifically, but I think that ultimately folks who can experience it, who are maybe have more interest in weather events and things like that, are much more aware, see the need, see the importance of addressing this now. For another example, in Fairyland, where they've had to replace they have a seawall that's been washed out a few times, and they're very cognizant of this. And there's other towns that are really making much more headway and doing a lot more. And again, I think the key, like I said, I don't think you can put it down to certain demographics. It's just a matter of who is actually experiencing this, who's noticing these differences, and folks who aren't as aware of this are a little more skeptical, or they don't see the need or the value as much in doing longer term planning and perhaps having to spend more money to adapt to greater storm surges or more powerful rainfall events and things like that. So yeah, that's been my experience anyway.
Thank you very much, Joe. Austin has his hand up. Austin?
I think something is happening. I think Christopher is working away, and sorry for the tech challenges here. It is always possible, folks, as well, to include your questions in the chat.
Austin, you're unmuted there now. You should be able to go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Christopher, and thank you for the opportunity for this engagement. I'm speaking as a patient who has been involved in research on a couple of projects, and I can tell you my experience has been positive, because the research I've been involved with are on specific topics which I have experience with as a patient. And there was the projects I've been working on that have like a specific topic, and all the patients that are involved were like the originators of the research. But unfortunately, the patients cannot be like originate research. You have to have a professional academic or a researcher to actually propose a topic or whatever, and get the patients involved. But I can tell you, over the past several years, the project I've been involved with as a patient has been a positive experience. I can assure you that what we are missing here in this culture in Newfoundland is a lack of information, lack of being informed as patients, and we have very little engagement. But I see we're having engagement today, which is quite positive. And we're given very little information and not enough collaboration. So I can only tell you, the patients that I've been involved with are the patients that have lived through an experience, especially in health. But every patient is unique, as every human is unique. And like, if you want to learn from people, especially here in Newfoundland, where we got such a closed community, and we got like a founder community. It's not only the Indigenous people that we can learn from, but we can learn from the people that have been here for several generations, and they learned the hard way also. But anyway, I think I've said enough. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thanks, Austin. I wonder, maybe Seftaf, did you want to respond to that?
Right. So, Steve, right? So thank you so much. I really heard every single word you said, and they are very powerful. I'm happy to hear that you had positive experiences as a participant in the research. And I would like to draw attention to NL support in Faculty of Medicine, which is really focused on providing support, educational materials, and so on, and even fellowship in patient-oriented research. And I think, if I'm not wrong, but they lately funded a research study actually led by a public member. So there are a number of opportunities for our patients, public members to be actually involved and generate research questions. And this is exactly what we are doing with my group, for example. And as you said, information needs was one of the the key top priority for we have identified in cancer as well. So I think what I want to say is that there are opportunities. I think NL support is underappreciated. I think the fact that and I put the link there, I can put it again. So please check it out. There are really great opportunities for our public members and patients to be involved and create research questions and be co-investigators in research questions. And also, just generate, get funding and actually conduct studies. So please explore these opportunities if you haven't done so. And it's really important to maybe and you are right, like in terms of connections, how do we connect? And this great event is one example, but there are others as well. So I don't know like how to make this connection better, but we are on the same page. We really need to work on this. And one other thing I want to say, Margaret, because you are Dean of Medicine, is maybe, within our social accountability, focus, maybe we can actually, it's an opportunity for all of us to actually work towards these opinions and questions we have today, like in terms of having a network for public engagement and making it easier, reaching out to our public members and engaging them more, and engaging with them more through our some tools. Or so that's all I want to say. I don't know whether, Steve, that made sense, or did I miss anything important? Steve, so if you have any question, you can put it on the chat box as well. And you can, I mean, if you want, you can also contact me with another question.
Yeah, so Thanks again, Austin, for your feedback. And we do want to work very closely with members of the community and organizations. So as Septav said, in the Faculty of Medicine, we have an Office of Social Accountability, which is led by Dr. Bolu Oganyami. You can reach out to me and I can connect you. We also do events, as you know, Septav's mentioned, she's initiated public sessions. So for example, we have another one that's through the Bells for Balls, and it's about ovarian cancer, and the public is very involved and welcome to that. We also have community open houses. We didn't have them, of course, during COVID, but that will be opened up. So any ideas, feel free to reach out to me or to Dr. Savis or anybody. We're happy to hear from you and want to work with people to disseminate knowledge as best we can. We also have a distributed model of education across the province. So we actually have physicians and staff all across Newfoundland and Labrador with our learners, and always looking for ways to engage the community members more in our work. So any other questions? I can't see Rebecca. Can you see any?
I don't see any hands up right now. Folks, we've got about 5 minutes left, so we do certainly have time for another question. I also wanted to draw attention to the survey. Folks can share their thoughts on the session we just had. And also, you know, Austin, Peter, all of you, if you have thoughts about what you'd like to see in a future session, that's very useful as well. I just saw a hand flicker on for one moment. Dan, did you have a question? We are using a slightly different format today and having some of those issues getting people able to speak. Dan, are you there now?
Hello?
Hello?
Hello, do you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. My name is Dan McGettigan. I'm not a researcher at MON or anything like that, but because of time, I'll just give a brief description. Retired parole officer, director of turnings and outreach to help some marginalized, particularly offenders, ex-offenders in and out of jail. And I learned a lot today about community engagement because I really do believe my whole focus in my career over the years, I'm 78 now, is that if people are aware and informed, I think that we can reduce victimization and recidivism and healing and increase healing and community capacity and help to create a more peaceful community. So I have engaged with university professors in that effort to have some kind of meetings at times with community groups or to form a committee too, particularly now that a new generation jail is maybe built, so that we do it correctly and that while we have to reduce victimization, the key is to increase education in schools about justice and about community and trauma and responsibility and accountability. So in the short time left, I won't speak much longer, but listening as someone from the outside of the scholarly area, I'm learning a lot, and I just want to probably learn more about who really, really engage people to help them be aware and educated so that we just don't leave it to the police, to the courts. There's enough responsibility to go around, and we certainly need everyone at the table who has. There are many gifted people who are not involved, and I think it will increase, help us create a more peaceful community. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Dan. And I'll ask Rose, but I just also want to inform you of another program that's at the university called the Newfoundland and Labrador Applied Health Research Group. NELCAR is the short form. And it actually has a number of interest groups. They call them research exchange groups that has community, government, researchers, academics, etc., in those groups, and people can connect with that. Rose, did you want to have the last word, so to speak?
Sure. I had a couple of thoughts when I was listening to some of the different questions. And the only thing I wanted to say, and I forget the name of the gentleman who had mentioned, sort of like sometimes wanting to get understanding of where a particular finding came from. And I just wanted to put out there that community engagement is really important in different ways because as researchers, we rely on data. So we don't own our data. Our data belongs to the people who talk to us. Each individual who participates owns their data and they let us analyze it for a greater study. So we don't own other people's stories. We don't own their survey responses in that way. So you should always be able to ask the lead researcher to show how that finding came about. And you should always be able to see yourselves in what's being produced. And I think it's an interactive process. It's really important if you're reading something and you don't see yourself. And it's not that n equals 1, so you should always see yourself. But if it doesn't resonate, it's okay to go back and have a dialogue and see why that is. And that just strengthens research in the end. So I think as much as there's an onus and there's different realities that are placed on the researchers, there's a lot of back and forth that can come with community engagement that will strengthen overall the nature of the knowledge produced moving forward. And to Dan's point as well, I just wanted to say exactly, the more we can have that engaging, that evidence-based or evidence-informed understandings to further strengthen what's going on in our communities and in those circles and the different ways we can do that will just move us forward in more progressive and positive ways. So I appreciated your comment, Dan.
So thanks very much. And I want to thank all our panelists. So Seftav Savas, Peter Ride, Rose Riccardelli, Joe Dario, and Amy Hudson. I want to use the words that Peter said. It was a fascinating, diverse panel and discussion, and I really appreciate all the audience participation. And as Rebecca said, please fill in the questionnaire and survey because that helps us improve and provide other sessions for people. So many thanks. And I heard some words that resonate with me: impact, participation, community, values, strength-based, lots of important key points made. So thanks everyone, and enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you.
Thank you so much.